the privilege of a return visit of my good friend Cukie Macomber, who's been here before. And tonight he's going to talk with us about a very interesting episode or interesting experience that he was personally involved in. And it has to do with a squabble that was a legal battle, I believe. And what Cukie's given me a little precursor of this. And it's a very interesting set of events that took place right here in the South Coast. So this is Dartmouth Historical and Arts Society. It's February 7th, and this is Cukie Macomber, 90-plus-year-old storyteller from Westport, Mass. He is connected with Russell's Mills because his wife Alice is Duvall, Alice Duvall, from the Duvall family at Russell's Mills. Cookie, it's all yours.
Somebody got a TV so we can watch the game? Okay, my subject tonight is basically about one person, but I got to tell you a little something about myself first. I was working for a company and very happy on the job. When I worked for someone, I worked as though I felt as though I partly owned the business and I worked according to it. So, because they had a sudden shortage of help, they asked me to work 56 hours a week until they got somebody to help me. Well, I couldn't say no, so I started doing that. And the only time I had with my family was on Sundays, and I just slept all day, so they were unhappy. And finally, after a couple of months of that, I just couldn't, my mind just couldn't take it anymore. And I walked off the job. And I met a man by the name of Bill Whipple as I was leaving, told him what I was doing. He said, well, come work for me. I said, well, I need a week or so to think about it. I said, I'm not in very good shape right now. Anyway, I decided that working for him would really be fun. I mean fun. So I went to see him and told him I would take the job. He said, go upstairs and tell the secretary what you want for pay. Well, I laughed. I thought that was a joke. He said, I'm not kidding. Whatever you tell her is what you're going to get. I went up and gave her a figure, and I got that pay. But that's how I got through his company. But Bill Whipple himself came from Marblehead. He grew up in Marblehead. He wanted to go to, he wanted to be a minister, so he wanted to go to Divinity College, which he did. But to pay the tuition, he went lobstering in the summertime and discovered that he had more fun than you could believe lobstering. He decided he was going to do that for a living. He got a boat from Maine, rented it, brought it to Westport with a load of lobster traps. The local lobstermen laughed at him because he had huge traps. They were 4 feet by 3 feet and all made out of wood. They were very heavy. But he started bringing in large catches of lobsters, and the local guys didn't laugh anymore. Well, Bill decided there had to be virgin lobster territory offshore. He was fishing on the continental slope, and no one had done that before. And it evidently turned out to be full of lobsters.
What year did he?
Well, you say something?
What year did you start?
I started to work for him in 1966, and he was already using that boat from Maine before I went with him. But he had got the funding and ordered a boat to be built. It was 45 feet long, designed by Ray Hunt, called a deep V hull. It was something new that Ray Hunt had designed, and had a 400 horsepower Detroit diesel engine in it. The keel was a big pipe that ran the whole length of the boat. And when the boat was stopped pulling the lobster traps, that pipe filled with water, which gave it more ballast. So it was much steadier. But when it was underway, the water all ran out of that pipe and lightened the boat and made it much more efficient. It would do 21 knots when it was underway. So I went to work for him as a maintenance man. I was going to take care of the boat, and he'd also purchased a lobster company off Cherry Webb Lane in Westport, and I would be in charge of the machinery that was running in that building. Well, the boat, the 45-footer, by the way, the name was Prelude 1, was the name of the boat, was doing very well, and he bought a 65-foot dragger with the intentions of making machinery to handle lobster traps that no one had ever seen before. And I was to be in charge of doing that. So I and some other guys started building what Bill designed on this 65-footer. We had a ramp so that the traps came up from forward of the boat and slid right up the ramp and onto a table on the boat where it was serviced. And then the trap traveled along and was stacked ready to go overboard when the traps were set out again. I'm not sure how many, I don't remember how many traps he had in the trawl, but later when we had our own boat and the captain was sitting over there, we fished 30 traps in the trawl, 30 fathoms apart. So it made a real long line of rope. So we've had some problems around Westport. We've lost one captain of a lobster boat who got his foot caught in the rope when the traps were going overboard, and he was never recovered. Another man got caught in the rope and went overboard. The captain figured he was down there at least 100 feet before he could haul him back up onto the boat, but he was well enough so the next day he wanted to go back out lobstering. It would have taken me a long time to say that word, I guess. But in order to prevent this from happening, Bill Whipple designed a process where when the traps came aboard the boat, like I said, I don't know how long the lines were, but they probably, at least a mile anyway, the rope would be. And when it came aboard, the traps would come off the line, and the line would all pile up in a big basket. And the traps would slide along, be serviced, and ready to go overboard. And when it was time to go overboard, spliced into that ground line were what we call gangions. They were stainless steel wires. It must have been about 4 feet long. And when it was time to put a trap over, that stainless steel wire was fastened to the trap, and away the whole works went off the boat. And it worked very well. So he had more plans. His mind was thinking all the time, always trying to invent something. He bought, through financing, the Pat San Marie, which was 101 feet long fishing boat made out of steel. And we built a wharf at Tripp's Boatyard and tied that ship up there. Mickey Orr and the crew built a greenhouse over the whole boat so that I and my crew could work on it all winter, building machinery and installing it on the boat, which we did. in the spring, the Pat San Marie went lobstering and started bringing in large catches. It drew so much water that we only made one trip out of Westport because at high tide it still rammed into the bottom of the river. So we had to move to Fall River. Then the next boat came along was the Crystal S, which was 98 feet. And, but that was converted in a shipyard. I didn't have to do that. But I and my crew were very busy maintaining what we already had. Next came a boat from Texas. The Wiley Fox was also 101 feet. It was a farmer research vessel. It had two V16 Detroit diesels for propulsion, and that was converted in Texas so that all the machinery was on it by the time it came to us. So we had 3 boats fishing, and he wanted one more. So he bought the Mars, which was 125 feet. That boat was extra special. All the lobsters went into wire baskets that were plastic covered wire that held 600 pounds. And when the basket was full, it was lowered down into the hold in water, so that when it was time to unload, those baskets came up by crane and slid right into an 18-wheeler that we had and taken back to our plant. So things were going great. And then Bill decided that he would, as president, he wasn't spending enough time in research and development. So they wanted to hire someone to be president and run the corporation. They advertised, and they got a man by the name of Joe Gaziano, who was vice president of Raytheon. Joe wanted a place to operate that was small and he could possibly build it up. And he came and became president of Prelude Corporation and proceeded to build it up. He bought 2 companies up in Maine, the Bucks Harbor Lobster Company and the Bucks Harbor Clam Company. He bought a company on the Boston Fish Pier, which was deep ocean products. And he bought Wickford Shellfish in Wickford, Rhode Island. And we were really booming. We had import-export business, fish business besides the lobsters. And the lobster boats, the 2 were at sea while 2 were in port continuously. And we were getting 50 to 75,000 pounds of lobsters per week. And the largest catch we ever had was on the Wiley Fox. They brought in 41,000 pounds in 5 days of fishing. So things were really going great. But it suddenly started to change. The Russians sent a whole fleet of draggers to southern New England to catch fish. They had a big mothership and a whole fleet of draggers. Draggers are probably 125 feet long. And they started sweeping up fish like mad. They deliver it to the mothership where it was processed, prepared to go back to Russia. At the same time they were doing that, they were towing their dredges right through our lobster gear. And we began to lose lobster traps like mad. Well, Joe went to the Coast Guard and they said they couldn't do anything about it because those ships were outside the 3-mile limit. And they had no control over that. Well, the Coast Guard took Joe out to the mothership and he went aboard and talked to the captain. The captain said, if you give me the bearings of all your traps, I will stay clear of them. Now, we used Loran for bearings at that time, and that would put you within 50 feet of any spot of the Atlantic Ocean. And they had no reason to run down our gear, but nothing changed. They were just sweeping right through our lobster traps. So Joe decided that he had to do something to stop that. So he got a good lawyer and sued the Russian government. Well, that caused a commotion. It came out in newspapers all over the world. And the State Department in Washington sent a man to our office and said, "You can't do this."
What year, Cukie?
That would be about 70 or 71. I'm familiar with a lot of stuff, but not dates. Anyway, we sued the Russian government. Well, the Russians returned an answer and said that that was a private industry, those ships, therefore you couldn't sue the government. Well, everybody knew that Russia had no free enterprise. Those ships are owned by the Russian government. And at the same time, they snickered. They kind of made jokes in their letters. They kind of made jokes about, you know, what can this little company in Westport do? Well, we did a lot. We had a U.S. Marshal go aboard a Russian freighter in San Francisco Harbor and put an attachment on it. And he had to stay on the ship so it couldn't move. It was costing them $1,000 a day for wharfage to be tied up there. And after about a week, the Russians communicated and said they would be in Westport on a certain day. Well, sure sounded good. My crew and I were there that morning because we kind of like to see what was going on. Well, state police cars, Westport police cars came roaring in with a great big huge limousine in the middle of them all. Behind them was TV trucks, radio trucks, and newspaper trucks, all carrying people who wanted to know what was going on. And by the way, at this time, people were sending me things from all over the United States where I had friends, showing articles in their local newspaper. And one of them was quite neat, I thought. It showed a huge Russian black bear sitting on a pier with a pole, fishing pole, and a little cradled lobster headed right by the tail. And as a result, we were quite famous. So the Russians came and talked for 2 days and made a settlement. They agreed to pay us $80,000, which would probably be worth 3 times that in today's figures. But that was for the lost gear only. They would not pay us for lost catch, which was actually the most important thing. Because we had no way of actually proving what the traps would have brought in, but we knew what they had been doing. So we made that settlement, and very shortly after that, we had a contact from a Spanish company that was fishing out there, and they said, "We want to make a settlement beforehand." And they came and they made a settlement and gave us a few $1,000s. When that was over, Joe Gaziano wrote a letter to President Nixon and said, "You've got to do something to protect our local fishermen." And that was the beginning of the 200-mile limit. It only took a short while as the Congress voted 200 miles. No foreign boats could fish inside of that without a permit from National Marine Fisheries, which certainly made a big difference. And we were able to keep fishing then without losing all of our gear. But as time went along, things changed. It was hard to believe that this happened, but overnight, the trip dropped in the boat from, say, 25,000, 30,000 pounds down to 10,000 pounds. Now, if we overfished, it seems though it ought to taper off some, but no, it went boom like that, right down to 10,000 pounds. Well, those boats with all that machinery running, it just couldn't make it on 10,000 pounds of lobster. So we started to slow down, and we switched over to red crab, which was a virgin fishery, and we started bringing huge loads of red crabs. We got a company set up by the government in New Bedford to process the crabs. The only problem was they had to be brought in and delivered alive. And no matter what, we couldn't get more than 50% of the catch to come in alive. So that went on for a little while, and it just wasn't turning out to be profitable. So they decided to shut the company down as far as lobstering goes. They sold all the boats. Pat Sainte Marie, which was the nicest boat, went to Alaska, and as far as I know, it's still fishing up there. The Crystal S went to Alaska, but the engineer didn't quite understand the water system, and somehow he left the valve open when it should have been closed, and before they could stop it, the boat rolled over and went to the bottom. The other boats, I know the Wiley Fox went to a company in New Jersey. The Mars, I'm not sure where that went. But by then, Joe Gaziano had moved on. He went to be president of Tyco Industries, which is one of the biggest companies in the United States. And he became really famous because he started doing the same thing he did with us. He's buying up companies. And I remember somebody sent me a newspaper, and it had a long story about the fight between Joe and some of these companies. He tried to do it by buying the stock. If he could buy your stock and buy your stock, he'd get enough maybe to the point where he had control and interest of that company. That's what he was working on. And these companies he was trying to buy were fighting back by buying the stock for themselves so that it wasn't available for him to get. And that went on for quite a while, but I don't know exactly what happened, but he passed away. And a man by the name of John Jensen took over Prelude Corporation. Meanwhile, Bill Whipple had moved to a new company called High Seas Corporation, and they were going to do red crabs. And it kind of left me as the only employee. But we still had Wickford, Rhode Island, and they asked me if I would go to Wickford and work on the machinery to set up a new fishery plant down there. And so I said, okay. So I drove down there, took an hour and a half to go, it was good driving. One accident on Service Avenue curve, and I was 2 to 3 hours one way to get to Wickford. So I worked down there for about a year till the plant was up and running, and the manager there was Jack McGeough, and I told him, Jack, you've got your building, the machinery's all running, I'm going home. He said, let's go up in the conference room and talk about this. So I went up with him and he started raising my pay. He's going to give me a van so I didn't have to drive my vehicle back and forth. I couldn't afford to leave him. I had to stay. I stayed for 7 years running the plant, and at about the 7th year, the Kranzer Corporation in Germany, who we did a lot of business with, we used to buy shrimp, large amounts of shrimp from them. Somehow they got controlling interest in Prelude, and they sent a man to operate it, and Jack McGee left the company with what's called Prelude International, which was importing and exporting seafood throughout the world. And this manager they sent was not a nice man, I don't think, because every time I talked to him, he couldn't look at me. He was always looking in another direction, and yet he's talking to me. To me, that's telling me that there's something not right here. A while went by, and the head bookkeeper called me one day and said, "Will you come up to my office?" So I went up there, and she said, "Eon," who was the manager, I don't remember his last name. "Eon comes in here every day and takes $200 to $300 cash and says it's petty cash, but he won't give me a receipt." She says, "I can't operate like that." So I said, "Well, Schulte Takeoff, the president of Kranzer, was coming in a few weeks." I said, "When he comes, I'll sit down and talk with him." So Schulte came, and I asked him if I could have a talk with him, and so we sat down, and I started to tell him what Eon was doing. He put his finger in my face and said, "Mr. Macomber, you will mind your own business." I gave him 2 weeks' notice. When I got home, my wife about killed me. 2 weeks? You should have walked off the job then. Well, all those people working there were my friends. I just couldn't walk out the door and leave things flat. So I stayed for 2 weeks, and I found a man who knew refrigeration and machinery, and he came in, took my place, and I left. Well, I'd hardly got home, and Bill Whipple called me. I don't know how he found out I left the job, but he called me, and he said, "I need somebody to go to Miami for me. Would you want the job?" So after he told me what it was all about, I said, "Okay." Well, he had High Seas Corporation at that time, and he had a boat. It was red crab. What he wanted to do was have a big boat where he could fish and process the product, and when it came off the boat, it was ready for the consumer. So I agreed to do it. So I went down there for 2 months while 4 men rebuilt the 2 main engines in the boat. Miami was the only place where you could find mechanics to work on Cleveland diesel engines that were built by General Motors. There's something different. Those engines were all steel, welded together. There's no cast iron in them. And they're so big they had ladders on each side so you could climb up to work on the top of the engine. But anyway, I was down there for 2 months in the, March and April, and quite happy with the job because I'd never been to Florida before. One little side story, I got my wife to come down for a weekend, and we decided that Sunday morning we're going to Key West, because we'd certainly never been there before, and we've got the van all loaded, and this government car drives in, and it's a U.S. Marshal. He comes aboard and says, "I'm here to confiscate this vessel until a bill in Brazil is paid." The man that Bill bought it from owed money in Brazil for wharfage for the boat being used down there. So I said, okay, we're headed for Key West. He said, no, you're not. He said, you're right on this boat. You can't leave until it's clear. Oh my gosh. About 11 o'clock, he spoke up and he said, I just got word that the settlement has been taken care of. You're free to go. Fine, we can go down there a ways, but he decided he's going to tell us all about fishing and growing vegetables and everything that he's ever done. So we're sitting there like this, you know, can't we get out of here? Finally, he ran out of talk and we took off. We got as far as Harmony, is it Harmony? Halfway down. And we turned around and came back. Well, the ship was finished down in Miami and it was brought to Fall River, tied on the end of the state pier at Fall River. My son here was the cook, and did you go fishing as a cook on that boat?
Okay.
Eventually, we bought our own boat, and he was going to be captain, so he had to leave. And the captain of the Taurus was disturbed because the best cook he ever had. But anyway, I and the crew, I got up to 49 men working on that boat for 2 years. Actually, it was only for a short while I had 49 because I couldn't handle them all. So I got a good friend who was really good at such stuff. He came in and he took half the crew and I took half the crew. And we built a whole second deck on that vessel, a new pilot house in a new area, and put all the machinery aboard. We had to build a big deep freeze. We had to have a refrigerated storage area. We had to have a big cooker for cooking the crabs. We had two machines that you put a crab in it, and saws cut the legs off. This other thing pulled the back off, and brushes brushed out the inside of the crab, so that when the pieces came out of the machine, they were already put into boxes that they were going to be shipped in. And they went right into a blast freezer. Oh, they were cooked first in a big steam cooker, and then they went into the blast freezer and then into refrigerated storage. Well, that went on, like I said, for 2 years, and the boat was doing very well. And then one night, my son, sitting over there, was captain of the Jenny and Jackie, a deep sea lobster boat. And he was 80, I think it was 80 miles from Westport, if I remember right. I got a pin in the chart that shows where it happened. The boat went down quick. Somehow a plate had to open up in the bottom of that boat. It was all steel. It went down so fast they barely had time to get survival suits on and get overboard. Paul put out a mayday and he got an answer, but they were already off the boat and the boat was half underwater, and another boat answered and said they would be there. He fired a flare in the air and it malfunctioned and just barely got up in the air and fell back in the water. But a very lucky thing happened. There was another offshore lobster boat not too far away who was looking for lost gear. So everybody was on deck just looking all around, and they saw that flare go up. So they came over and picked him up. I think they took you into Newport, didn't they?
Convicted.
Oh, okay. And next day, they were all set to take another boat, go out there and finish hauling the gear. So, right after this happened, my wife said to me, why are we letting him make a lot of money for somebody else? Why isn't he doing it for us? Yeah, that's an idea. So Paul and I went looking for a boat. We looked at a few. And then we found one in Newport called the Glad One. And 55 feet, all steel, seemed to be in excellent condition, and we bought it. We spent the whole winter making it into what I considered a proper boat. It needed a lot of safety things. Didn't have a mast, we had to have a mast, so we did that. And we had tow rails so you couldn't slide overboard, which it didn't have. There was no refrigerator, there was no stove. I understand the owner went to sea with sandwiches and went the whole trip eating sandwiches. So we didn't want, so we went to work and his crew and I put it together and had our own lobster boat. Meanwhile, Bill Whipple was fishing the Taurus, and I think he was doing quite well, but all of a sudden he decided to move on. And he sold the Taurus, he bought a big beam trawler out of Boston, and he and his two sons went to work on it. I taught one of them how to weld, and he wound up doing a nice job of welding. And they went to Key West with that. They're going to fish for golden crab. And they did. But I don't know exactly what happened. But all of a sudden the boat was sold and he moved up to Fort Lauderdale. And he rented a boat up there and went golden crabbing off Fort Lauderdale. And from what his son said, I think he was doing quite well. Eventually, he got his own boat. But, in my opinion, he did it the right way. He did it the way we did it. He got a boat that was 50 feet long. Doesn't take a lot of maintenance, doesn't take a big crew. And you may not catch as many as a big boat, but at least the expenses are way down so that you can make some money. And I understand he was doing very well down there. But all his life he's had a back problem. I used to go in his office and he'd be laying on the floor because it's the only place he was comfortable with his back. And it wasn't long after he moved to Fort Lauderdale that he started to really have back problems. And it got so bad that his sons went down there one day with a pickup truck and a mattress in the back and put him in it and drove straight through to Boston without stopping. Go to the toilet and have something to eat, that's all. He drove right to Boston, and he had cancer of the spine. And he didn't go too long after that. They moved him back down to Charlton Hospital so that he could be near his family. Meanwhile, his oldest son was running the business in Fort Lauderdale. And to end it, the saddest thing was that his wife called me one day and she said, "Bill wants to talk to you." And I said, "Well, I can't do it tonight. I forgot I had a meeting or something." I said, "I'll go see him tomorrow night." He died before I got there. Anyway, he was one of the smartest engineering people that I ever met. If you had a problem of any kind, he'd sit down with his clipboard and start marking and moving the pen around, and he'd come up with an answer to solve your problem. I said that we made an arrangement where the traps came off the ground line. Ground line was 3/4 of an inch rope. I worked to try to invent something that would clip onto the rope. And I got one that would do it, but it needed a lot of refinement. And a company in Seattle worked with stainless steel in the marine business. So he went to see them, and with the idea that we had, and they made clips made out of stainless steel. And each clip had a stainless wire that went to the trap, and nothing separated. The clip stayed with the trap all the time. And when the trap came up aboard the boat, slid right up onto the platform, a machine pushed a pin out on the clip, and then let the tail fall down, and the thing came right off the line. Just like that. Clip, clip, and it's off the line. To go back on, it's the same thing. Just hang the clip on the rope, and when it went through this machine for steadying, it pushed the tail up, pushed the pin in, and away it went, right off the boat. That was one of his inventions, for example. And we need more people like that in this world. He had one problem, and it's close to being his real downfall, and that is the financial man. When he got an idea, he gets so excited, he's got to build it. When I left to go and run our own boat, I was in the middle of building a trap rider to go on one of his boats. The way that worked, the trap would come up into this machine, and whichever way it had to go, it turned the trap so that it's right side up. And then, when you opened the cover, the machine dumped the trap, so all the crabs came out. You didn't have to touch them. Well, I went back one day, and the thing wasn't on the boat yet, but two guys were working on it. So I said to one of them, who is pretty smart about that stuff, I said, how much money's been spent on this so far? They said, I'm quite sure it's around $20,000. Well, they finished it, put it on the boat, and a few weeks later I went up, and the crew wouldn't use it. It's all mounted on the boat, all run hydraulically, and they wouldn't use it. The traps come aboard, and they did them by hand. They took the covers off, they dumped the traps, put the bait in, and away they went. He wasn't going to use that machine. But that's an example of how Bill worked. I mean, he could invent anything, but is it going to be used? And I guess that must be pretty close to my story. My son here ran our boat, it's 19 years, wasn't it?
18, I think.
18 years. And then he decided he didn't want to be at sea all the time, so he retired. And the first mate took over the boat, and he did a good job. And Paul went inshore lobstering, which was never too successful in the last few years. He didn't do that too long. Now he's a contractor. And he's making more, I think he's making more money than he ever did. And the boat we sold to the first mate, who was captain at the time we sold it. That boat was built in 1972, and it's still going, but it's well taken care of. It's not rusted out like some of them do. I guess that's all I can say. If anybody has any questions. I don't use notes. What'd you say your name is?
Anyway.
You can introduce me to somebody right now. This lady right here. Introduce me to her. I'll walk over to that door and, oh, what did they say her name is? My short-term memory is terrible, but I can tell you all about the 1930s, the 20s.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Cukie.
You're very welcome.
Are there any questions?
I got a couple. Cukie, when did you officially retire from...
What's that?
When did you officially retire from Prelude?
Retire from what?
Prelude. The
Oh, Prelude?
Prelude, yeah.
That was 83. No. That's when I left Bill Whipple. High Seas was 83. It would be about 75. I left Prelude because of the Germans taking over.
That was a good run.
What's that?
That was a good run.
Yeah. One experience that I had, the 78 snowstorm. I was in Whitford. I always worked till 5 o'clock. And this day I could see it was really getting deep. Well, about 4:30 I'm going home. I started for home. All I ran into was red taillights all over the highways. That van I had would go anywhere. I turned around and went down Route 1, dodging automobiles that were stuck. I even went through a guy's lawn in one place to get around a bunch of cars. And I got down to the Green Airport, and the road was solid with red taillights. So I turned around and started back. I got onto Allen's Avenue. I thought, I can sneak around onto 195. I didn't go half a mile and I'm stopped. I had a trailer truck alongside of me in the left-hand lane. I got out, went over to him, I said, can you back up, get those people behind that booth so I can swing around in front of you and go the other way? Yeah, sure. Well, he very slowly, he backed up until I could go through there, and I started south, and I got, I don't know the name of the area, but I got well south down to Warwick, I think it was, and the van finally ran into a huge drift, and there I was, couldn't move. I got into a little store. The lady said, I'm going to stay open all night so you people can sleep here if you want to. So most of us got on the floor, and a policeman came and said, we've got a bus out in front and we'd like to take you to a church. And oh, that sounds wonderful. So we all went out and got in this bus, and a payloader from the Cukie Corporation arrived. The biggest thing, I mean, I worked with machinery. That's the biggest one I ever saw. The rear tires were higher than my head. And he cleared out in front of the bus, and then he went around behind it and picked the back of the bus up and pushed it ahead until he got into the clear place. And then he went around in front, and we followed him down a road. In fact, the driver saw me in working clothes. Would I sit next to him so he could have me communicate with the driver if necessary? So we started down this road, and we came to a place where we turned into somebody's driveway, and we went between the garage and the house and into a big field. The driver of the bulldozer, of the loader, must have known the area, and we came out onto another street, and we followed that for a certain distance, bulldozing snow all the way. Oh, yeah, he could pick up some cars and just move the whole car. He picked up a green Volkswagen Bug and picked it up, and the guy sitting beside me said, you know something, that's my car. But he didn't hurt it, he just swung around and he set it down over there, and we went along, and we came to a church in Warwick. And we all got out, went in the church, and we lived there for 3 days in the church.
Wow.
The state police came with a ski-mobile and a trailer, I should say a sled, not a trailer, loaded with food every morning. And the women of the church cooked the food. It was mostly Italian food, the easy ones, like spaghetti and so forth. We had it for breakfast, lunch, and supper, but we didn't care. And we were there for 3 days, and finally, the state trooper said it was open to Newport, so I called my company, and they sent a big truck up to pull me out of the snowbank, and I went home. So that was, I've had a lot of experiences in my life, and I'm glad I remember them all.
You do remember them.
One story, Cookie, but the time that your boat sank off the East Beach area.
Who's talking? Oh, yeah.
The time that your boat that you were on sank, and you were on the boat, and you can't
No.
swim. That was you, wasn't it?
He was captain.
You went down off Gooseberry and came over on the can.
Yeah.
What's that?
You went down off on Gooseberry and came in on the 5-gallon can.
Oh, you're talking about a different accident.
Well, there were two, but the one that you talked about.
I was in one shipwreck, and he was in another one. I was in a wreck off Downey's Joint.
Yes.
The Hilda was a dragger. And a friend of mine, it ran into the breakwater in Martha's Vineyard, and this friend of mine bought it and had it repaired, and he had the engine all gone through, supposed to be in perfect shape. And he said one day, I want to bring it to Westport and we'll finish the boat in Westport. I was in the welding business, so I could help him with a lot of things. We started out in New Bedford, a perfectly calm day. Like young guys, we didn't have a life jacket, we didn't have a radio, we didn't have a fire extinguisher. We just were going to Westport. We weren't going very far. We came around Clark's Point, and that wind started to blow out of the southwest. It was unbelievable. And the boat was big enough. We had no problem with those seas, but we were really diving in them. And all of a sudden the engine started to sputter, and it quit. So me being the engineer, I dashed down in the engine room, and I figured it had to be a filter, so I put a new filter in, and the engine started up. And we went another distance, and it did the same thing again. Now that engine started by compressed air, and we didn't have an auxiliary compressor on board. The only compressor was on the engine. If the engine didn't run, you're not compressing any air. Now, I don't know, we started it maybe 4 or 5 times, and what happened is they cleaned the fuel tanks, but there's a day tank that the engine runs on. Evidently they didn't clean it, and it was full of junk. And when you start diving up and down, it stirs it up, and it was going right in and plugging up the filter. Well, finally, we couldn't start the engine. There was no compressed air. And so we had 2 huge kedge anchors on board. They must have been 150 pounds apiece. And we also had 600 feet of cable on 2 winches. So we lashed one anchor up and threw it overboard. And those seas would lift that bow up, and you could feel the anchor coming back. And lift it up, anchor come back. We put the other one over. It slowed it down some, but it's still going backwards. We had the old-fashioned Coke machine that you put water and ice in. We put fuel oil in that and lit it on fire, hoping the Coast Guard in Cuttyhunk would see it. They had a Coast Guard in Cuttyhunk at that time. And we had a beautiful blaze going. Well, Bob Hebden was another captain who knew we were supposed to be at a certain time, but we didn't show up in Westport. So he went looking for us, and he saw the fire. So he called the Coast Guard and told them that the boat is right off Macomber Point, and evidently it's headed for the beach. Coast Guard said they sent a boat out but couldn't find us. Well, that's a lot of baloney. I mean, with that fire going up, I think they pulled out of Cuttyhunk and got clear of Pettakees out into the open water, and that thing they were in started to fly up and down, and they decided we weren't going to go any farther. I believe that's what happened, because they had to see the fire that we had going in that boat. Anyway, we hit the first rock that almost knocked us flat on the deck, and I had a situation when I was a little kid. I fell overboard, and I haven't forgotten that. I remember being in the water, and I could see light up there, but I couldn't get to it. Finally, somebody jumped in the water and pulled me out, and I've had a fear of being in the water ever since. So these guys are going to jump over and go ashore. I said, not me, I'll stay on this boat. Yeah, I'm going to break up. That mast might come down and hit you. The guy comes up with a 5-gallon can. He said, wrap your arms around this and jump over. So I did. The water came up to about here on me, all the way. Even the big waves, the water was about here. Because I had a salt line on my jacket when it was over. That's my experience with a shipwreck.
Most of you think from this talk that all he knows about is marine engineering and stuff, but we're gonna have to hear the story about dowsing and finding water sometime.
I did it
That's the
for,
next talk.
I did it for about 30 years,
Yeah, I know you did.
and, but I didn't know how to charge. I charged $25 for every time I looked for water, and I didn't make a lot of money. But I was the only guy doing it, so I didn't know how anybody else would be charging.
Well, any other questions? We're gonna-
Just a little reminder that you mentioned the blizzard of '78.
Yeah,
That was 38 years ago tonight, I believe.
whatever. Is it tonight?
It was either the
Hey, Paul, let's go home quick.
It was either the 7th or the 8th, but I remember that, because everybody seems to remember where they were. If you were alive at that period,
Yeah.
you remember what you were doing.
I know where I was, but I couldn't tell you the exact date.
Yeah. I was trying to get home myself, and I was driving a little sports car.
Yeah.
I got it to from Norton to North Dartmouth, 4 hours. And I finally was able to hitch a ride back here to Russell's Mills.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's something you never forget, those storms.
2 weeks from tonight, same time, same place,
What's the subject?
Richard Giffen is going to talk
Oh,
about
okay.
houses of the descendants of William White of the Handy House.
I don't think I'll be here because he's already done it for me.
Okay, anyway, thanks again, Cukie, and
You're welcome.
we'll have you again as soon as possible.
I got a lot of them.
I'm sure you do. Thanks a lot.